Okay, ladies, thank you so much for joining us for the Truth Collective's Wednesday webinar. I confess to you, we titled this webinar a little tongue-in-cheek. We called it Easy as 1-2-T, knowing that it's not even close to easy at all, and for some of us, harder than others. I always joke with people, I'm at the extent of my hospitality gift is pizza on paper plates. That's my general gift. And so, so this is as much for me as it is for anybody who's listening. So we were sharing our teacups. This is my teacup that was given to me as a gift. It comes from Iran, and you can see the little Persian, what's the word I'm looking for? The little pharaohs that are around there. And so it has a sweet, special meaning for me. Jennifer, your teacup comes from where?
Mine comes from Kazakhstan, Western Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan. And and remind me the Kazakh word for it is?
Kise.
Kise.
So to some it looks like a little bowl, but no, it's a teacup.
Yeah. Well, that's, we decided that's so they could keep their hands warm, right?
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So, so I hope you all are enjoying your favorite tea as well. Let me first ask you to do one thing for us, and then I'll introduce Jennifer. When you think about hospitality, and I'm going to even go so far as to say, when you think about extending hospitality to your Muslim neighbor or a friend from work, or you know, wherever your Muslim connection might lie, even if you haven't actually made that connection yet, what would you say, the one thing that causes you to hesitate in reaching out to that person and inviting them into your home? And I just want you to take just a second to think that through, and maybe even write it down if you have paper nearby. Because towards the end, as we get an opportunity to talk together and discuss together and ask questions, we're going to come back around to some of those things and talk about them. So be thinking about that. But let me also introduce you. Jennifer is a very good friend of mine. Jennifer and I have worked together for a number of years, but she actually spent 17 and a half years in between the United States and other distant lands, serving with Frontiers as a missionary, but also as a mobilization, specialist, I guess is the word. I don't know what the exact title was, but mobilization specialist. She and I then worked together at Crescent Project, and she now serves with Vision 5-9, and she also serves as a board member for the Truth Collective. And so it's a privilege to have her here in that regard. But Jennifer is also, and by no comparison to anyone I've ever met, an expert in the matter of hospitality, and has had the opportunity to not only extend hospitality, but to be the recipient of it in countries around the world. Jennifer, do you have any idea how many countries you have traveled to? Does your passport have a number?
I do know that number if you want me to share it.
I do want it.
47.
47 countries. And I know that you have received hospitality in almost all of those countries, if not all of them. So you can see why I would call her an expert. So Jennifer, without further ado, let me ask you, where did your heart for hospitality really start? Where did it stem from? Where did it come from? Just kind of give us a peek into your own journey in the matter of hospitality.
Yes, thanks, Jamie. Definitely not the expert, but I am grateful as I begin to look back. I really see how the Lord had really imparted in my heart a real vision to welcome others. And so, to be honest, it really actually started in high school, actually junior high, when I was the recipient of some extended hospitality from my best friend's family. They were very wealthy, and we were very poor and struggling, and they always opened up their doors to me and offered me just to come and be with them. They took me places, but just really showed me love through just being with me and inviting me in to be a part of their lives. And then in high school, I just really saw my mom really flourish in this gift of hospitality. Mind you, she wasn't a believer. She came from a big family, so I think that's where her root was. But I think for her, it was just, she loved to cook, and so she cooked for many, and so we always invited people over. So my best friend still lived in this huge house up on the hill, and I lived in this really small apartment, but my apartment was always full because my mom was always eager to invite people over. So that's where I really saw, I'm like, okay, I don't have to have a big house. Like, I can invite people to my little apartment. And so I really saw my mom demonstrate that. And we didn't cook fancy meals, but whatever she cooked, she just put out for us and served us that way. And so, of course, that kind of really bled into when I went away to college. My home became what I saw my mom demonstrate in our home growing up. And my place would be the place where I invite all my friends to come over, and we'd have our study sessions there, and they let me experiment on them as I cooked different foods. But I kind of, again, I was the recipient, but then I really saw it modeled in my mom.
Thanks, Mom. That's good stuff. So one of the things that I think we want to clear up pretty early on is just kind of the definition, the true definition of true hospitality. Because I think, and we'll talk about this some a little bit later too, but I think it can get distorted. I think it can get morphed into some counterfeit version. And so for me, I would love to know, what is the biblical definition of hospitality? Where do we come up with that notion, and why is it so important, even in our own Christian worldview? How does God see that?
No. Oh, that's great, Jamie. No, and kind of, again, morphing kind of from my own background, realizing how easy it is to kind of get caught up in what you see and how that defines what hospitality is. And then it wasn't until in college I became a believer that you begin understanding how God sees it. And so I wish tonight, I was telling Jamie, we definitely don't have enough time. We need a good 3 hours. Wouldn't you agree, ladies? Because I feel like the scriptures are really rich in helping us understand really what hospitality is. Not to distract us, but I think if we look at it today, I think some might perceive it as real, like entertainment. Lay out this big spread, open up your doors, make sure you pull out your best china, make sure you hire the mariachi band for Cinco de Mayo. Like, we tend to really pour it in, and it almost becomes like we're entertaining people. Come to my home and let me entertain you. But yet when I read in scriptures, I realize it's not entertainment at all. It is really wanting to bless the Lord with what I have and bless others with what he's given me. And so I saw throughout, we're not going to have a time now to really go through a ton of Bible study on these verses, but I did want to highlight a couple. And the first one was just in Genesis 18. And I love just the posture that Abraham took. When he saw visitors coming from afar, he rushed and wanted to serve them. And it wasn't just serving them with a hello from a distance at his door, but he rushed to them, invited them in, gave them what was needed to wash their feet, gave them what was needed to quench their hunger. Then I'm like, oh, wait. It wasn't about Abraham being the honored person. It was about him honoring those who came his way. And then you see in other verses, it talks about, especially like in Leviticus 19, where it talks about the sojourner, the traveler. And it says, you shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as a native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, you who are strangers in the land of Egypt, and I am the Lord your God. So again, it's this, again, we've talked a lot about it a lot in these last couple of years, that the visitor, the stranger, that we are to welcome him in, him or her or they in. And then there's another one I was really in 2 Samuel 17, again, where it shows when David comes to Mirameh, and what is brought to him. They bring him food and they prepare a feast for him. Again, I look at that and I thought, wow, there was no mention about what their house looked like, what they looked like, what they had, what they didn't have. But it really, to me, it honed in on like, what God had given them, they used to serve and bless others. And so for me, I see that as hospitality. And then obviously we see several examples in the New Testament as well. You see in Matthew, again, we can we look at Matthew 25, 37 through 46 with that lens of hospitality, where he says, for when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. And then they're like, Lord, we didn't. And he's, and so again, we see that story of like, the people created my image, all people, when you give and you bless them, you are blessing me. So I'm like, wow, okay, Lord. So how easily I can fall into the trap of making it about me and what I can do, but rather than what you've given me and how I can bless others through that. There's a couple other verses I wanted to mention. Like I said, there's so many, but Romans 12, 9 through 13, down to Hebrews 13, 1 through 3, 1 Peter 4. And then even when you look into like Titus and 1 Timothy, when it talks about the mark or the qualifications of a leader, it talks about hospitality. So in Titus 1, it says, be hospitable, a lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. And I'm like, be hospitable was first on the list. So that really stands out to me, that I'm like, okay, so we see not only in the Old Testament, there was this need to provide for people as they journey. But then in the New Testament, we really see that hospitality becomes a mark of the church, that we as a church are supposed to reach out and love and serve one another. And I just thought, wow, that really helps keep me grounded in what hospitality is, because it's tempting to make it into something that God didn't intend it to be. And if we reign there, then I feel like that's where all those insecurities, those fears, I feel like they can easily take hold of us when we're trying to practice hospitality as God didn't intend it.
Yeah, and I think some of the best examples that we can find, actually, there are beautiful, beautiful women of Christ who have amazing gifts with hospitality, but hospitality is innate in the culture of most Muslim countries. And so one of the things that I appreciate about getting together with my Muslim friends is it's just this innate cultural value of hospitality. So you, in 47 countries that you've been to, probably could say as well that the Muslim world definitely has a handle on the value of hospitality. What does that look like? Can you give us some practical examples of things that you've seen in various countries that are really just a beautiful example of hospitality?
Yeah, again, when I, as a young 20-something, started my journey in serving the Lord cross-culturally in a Muslim context, I was blown away, because what was so apparent was this heart for hospitality. And it didn't take me long to experience it firsthand. I had landed in Kazakhstan, and the third week I was there, I broke my ankle. And so, but it was amazing, because not knowing the language, still trying to get my bearings around the town, I got to see this community just jump into action. They helped find me because they saw the need I was in. So they found me a doctor. They found a way for me to get to the doctor, because I didn't drive there in the country. They sat with me while I went to the doctor. They sat with me during physical therapy. And it just blew my mind. I'm like, you don't know me, but yet you want to reach out to me and take care of me. So that really, for me, it really spoke to my heart language of love, and just the time that they invested in me. And then throughout my years there, I'll never forget, I'm just feet away from my kitchen. And so I would walk into my kitchen and I'd be filling up the tea kettle to make more water for our tea. And I could hear in our living room, which was called the Zal, I could just hear laughter. And I just loved that I learned from the Kazakhs that you don't look at the size of your room. You just invite everyone in, because my living room was constantly filled with people, because they thought if there was a room to sit down and shimmy, on the carpet, they would sit down. And so I just loved that by their hospitality, I learned more and more what I saw God instructing us to do as the church. And so not only was it limited to the Kazakhs. I remember one time I was in Turkey. So I was in a small village in Turkey, and we were prayer walking. And all of a sudden I looked over there, and I recognized a woman, and I'm like, I think she looks Kazakh. So I just I encouraged my friends to let's walk over there. And we just started talking. I greeted her in Kazakh, and sure enough, she was Kazakh, because their countries are right next to each other. So it wasn't that uncommon, but yet I was in a small village. And without hesitation, after me saying "Samamatsizba," which is just greeting her, she invited me in. And I looked to my friends, and they looked to me, and I said, let's go for it. And so merely with a simple greeting did she open up the door, and we sat there for hours, and we went back there 3 other times before we left. But again, just a simple greeting led to the willingness. She didn't even know me, and I was just baffled by that, because I find if someone knocks on my door, Jamie and ladies, I might not even answer it, I'll confess. But more than likely, if I don't know that person, I would definitely not invite them in. So I just thought, wow. And mind you, that happened in Turkey, but that wasn't the only place. That happened throughout the Muslim world. So the spontaneousness of just hospitality, I'm like, there was no plan. And I love that. And again, probably one of my more special times, again, really helping me really dig down into the heart of what God really intends for us to be church as hospitable people, was my time in Darfur. And so, there's war going on. You can hear gunshots everywhere, but that did not limit their desire to be hospitable to the stranger, to the foreigner. And I'm a coffee drinker. I love tea, but I like coffee too. And word got out from the neighbor who's in the hut across the walkway. So we're in huts, that I loved coffee. So she invited me over, and she showed me how she roasted her coffee. And just through this common interest of roast of coffee, I sat with her. We sat there for 2 hours, and mind you, there was no electricity. I could barely see her, but we just sat there and we just enjoyed fellowship. And I understood just such in a rich way what hospitality was. So
Sounds like hospitality is more about time and attention than it is anything else.
yeah.
And even though I'm not a hospitality person per se, I definitely recognize it. A few weeks ago, I was in Morocco, and I was with a friend of mine, and we were shopping in these little stalls. And as we started asking questions of the shopkeeper, he asked us if we wanted tea. And I was just like, okay, we're standing in the middle of a store. Like, how are we going to do that, right? But I don't know if you can see this picture, but he pulled up this little table you can see down here, and he called one of his friends from a nearby restaurant, and they brought over tea, and they piled up some fabrics, which are behind us, to make little chairs. And it was just like, that's hospitality right there. And that was some of the best tea, by the way. A concoction of herbs that were beautiful. So it was just kind of this notion of, I want you to feel blessed here, and I want you to feel like you can spend time here and be comfortable here. So yeah, I think it's about that time and that attention. Jennifer, just very quickly, we don't have to go too far into this, but what is the difference between, we talked about the doctrine of hospitality in the Bible, but what is the Quran? What's the difference? Where does this propensity for hospitality come from? And in your opinion, how is it maybe how is it maybe distorted in a way that that maybe drives it a little bit further away from a godly expression, do you think?
Yeah, no, that's good. And again, realizing that even this value of hospitality, it runs deep. It's pre-Islamic, so it was very much a part of the Bedouin culture. And again, being able to experience that when I spent time in Egypt with the Bedouins, I'm like, I get it, Lord. Again, looking for this place to be able, because of harsh conditions, needing to provide, right, as people travel. There are numerous surahs, and so I don't know if you want me to like put those in the chat, but many of them. So I thought I'd read a couple of them. For it says in Surah 49:13, it says, "O mankind, we have created you from a male and female and made you into nations and tribes, and you may know one another." And then again, there's a variety of surahs that actually talk about extending hospitality is doing so because God has extended it to us, right? And it even is quoted somewhere in the Hadith, which I don't have the exact reference, where it says that Muhammad actually said that there is no good in the one who is not hospitable. So I'm like, that's pretty powerful in talking about just the value that is recorded in the Quran about hospitality. And again, being able to, like I said, experience myself. The question you asked about where might some realignment need to be, maybe is the word, is one of the things I did find is just this connection of really understanding that I felt like they knew they needed to be hospitable and extended that, but the connection that doing it for the Lord, oftentimes it didn't seem very present there. I don't know if that makes sense, but I felt like at times as well, like they're really of being able to say, well, this is just what we do versus why we do it. And so, and boy, ladies, I'm sure you would agree with me, like how many times we're doing things and we don't know why. And so to really to be able to understand that they're opening their door to the stranger because it could really bless and honor God, that I guess for me, I found myself more and more longing for that. And so the times when I was a recipient, really praying that. One of the sweetest things that helped remind me how Jesus could be glorified even in a home of a Muslim that I was the guest was, especially in Kazakhstan. The first thing, there's a lot of rituals involved. So the first thing you do when you go in to set the table, you set the bread on the table first. I lived with Kazakhs, and so they could never tell me why they did that, but they just did it. And I'm like, okay. But I saw that, again, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when we see bread? Bread of life. And so it gave me opportunities to be like, Lord, may this function turn into something you are going to reveal yourself, and that they will get a full understanding of the hospitality that they can experience by knowing you, Lord.
Yeah, and that's the whole point, right? I mean, I think yes, that's probably a distortion in Islamic hospitality, but I think that we're just as susceptible to putting on, right? And Jenny, like one of the things I struggle with, and we don't have to go too much into this because I want to give these gals time to talk as well, but there are some women, and you are one of those women, who absolutely loves to build a beautiful space and make things just so. And I think if I'm not mistaken, in scripture, it's a gift, right? It's one of the gifts is hospitality. And so what I want to be careful of is, it's not that the expression of that gift, to whatever extent the Lord leads you to do, that's not like that's the problem, right? But it's that when it becomes the drive and the obligation, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when that becomes the drive and the central point and the obligation, and I think I think our guests see that too, right? They can see the difference. You can see the difference between somebody who's just like poured out their love onto their table and somebody who's freaking out because you moved the coaster. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, is there any?
Yeah, can I make one more comment about that? One of the things, and I say this proudly, I often tell people, "Min Kazakpun," I am Kazakh, because I felt, as we all feel like we want to teach and feel like we've got more to teach than we have to learn. I am so grateful for what I learned in living overseas and traveling throughout the Muslim world, that I'm proud of that. And so now, what I love so much about practicing hospitality anywhere I go, especially in my home, is my hope that I can be what God can use to help us understand what true hospitality is. I'm back in that small little apartment. I don't have much, but what I have found, and again, the Lord he does rebuke me if I'm putting too much emphasis on what I'm cooking. And usually I'm always wearing like sweats, because usually when you're ready preparing a house, and that's what's funny, like oftentimes in the Muslim world, the hostess is actually she's wearing her house clothes that actually look like she's going to be falling asleep. Like, you're like, wait, you didn't doll up. And so I've continued to practice that. But what I found is I don't want to get so caught up in the preparing that I totally overlook and I'm not present for when my guests arrive. And so I really see the table. And again, this goes back to where I saw Jesus sitting and listening and being with his guests. And so for me, that has been a high value I've really practiced. And you can ask any of my friends, they come over, and what the highlight is the fellowship we have around our table. They might remember sometimes when I cook, because they don't like to cook. But more times than not, it's the fellowship that happens and the way that God moves in our midst, that becomes the highlight. And they know that I desire to want to set my small table for that way in which, so God can work there. So for me, that's a real value.
Yeah, what you're referring to is a word that's really tricky for me, but another concept that's extremely important in the Muslim world, and that's the word honor, right? Not only to honor God, but also to honor your guest. And there's counterfeits of that as well. But one of the things that's I'm really trying to work on and to look for even when I'm at somebody else's house and it's their hospitality, like, how can I honor this person? It's almost like a reverse hospitality. Like, I'm in their home, but I want to honor them, right? Because it opens up so many doors. And I don't know, maybe this is really easy for most of you gals out there, but it's not for me. And so I just want to recommend this resource to you. One of our own fellows, the Truth Collective fellow, Audrey Frank, released this book last August called Covered Glory, Honor and Shame in the Muslim World. You can find it on our website. If it's a struggle to understand the concept of honor, and more importantly, a struggle to understand what does the Bible say about true honor, I highly, highly recommend this book for you. And there'll be other recommendations as well as we go on. Okay, Jennifer.
Hey, Jamie, sorry. Can I share one silly example of honor and how I had to learn how to practice it?
Okay,
sorry, it just came to me.
Let me take notes first.
Okay, So how many of you have sat as a guest, right? It's more of us being the guest. And to honor someone, I'm like, that means I want to eat everything that they've provided for me. So I'm cleaning my plate. Well, in the Muslim world, that's a sign of, like, if the plate's empty, you load up more. And I just remember thinking, oh, wait a second. Wait, now I'm puzzled. What does it mean to really honor? Because I thought, finish my plate. That's what I was taught, right? And I'm like, wait a second. Every time I finish it, I get more. I can't eat everything. And so it was just really comical in one sense. And you have to be willing to, like, laugh at yourself of learning how others might interpret hospitality, right? And for us just to remember that. But I think what we're really trying to emphasize tonight, it's really at the heart of allowing, Lord, we want to bless you, right? We want to be about blessing you and not worrying about them, but blessing him. And through that, that really honors and makes them feel welcomed and loved. So sorry, that funny picture, I can't tell you how many times it took me a while to catch on, but once I did, it helped me throughout my career and time in the Muslim world.
It probably would have taken me even longer because I rarely see a clean plate. I'm constantly piling my own food on my plate, so I don't see empty plates very often.
I hear you.
So let's take a couple of minutes, and then we're going to transition to a time of discussion to talk about. Okay, it's coronavirus world. It's cray cray, as my teenagers sometimes say. Out there right now, and as much as we love to sit and to together pick up teacups together and serve food together, right now that's prohibited. In countries around the world. A friend of ours in Jordan, it's actually illegal to go outside, so it's getting serious. So what does that mean in your opinion, Jennifer? What does that mean? How do we express hospitality right now to people that we can't physically sit with?
No, and I realize, and I'll confess, because I actually told Jamie, I'm like, Jamie, this probably isn't a good time for us to do a webinar about this. And she was like, no, now's the best time. And so I've really grown and really seen in this last week, this is a pivotal time for us to be talking about it, because I just heard a news anchor, Lester Holt, who's one of my favorite, who I'm like, he's the trusted man. If he says it, I believe it. And he says how eerie it feels to walk down the street. He was walking his dog, and to have people turn away and almost look awkward and not knowing what to do. And I just, as I've seen that myself, as I was at the market this morning, I just realized, wow, this could be a way the enemy could drive us apart. And I thought, Lord, and that just, I found myself really anxious. I'm like, Lord, no. And then I just, as in preparing for this, it really, and then, and seeing it practice in my community, I'm like, Lord, there are powerful ways that we can still reach out. And so I did list 3 things. If you hadn't already thought of them, or if you had, it's the confirmation that you're on the right track. But one is, I thought maybe for those of you on the call, or those of you who are watching this, look at this as a time to connect with your Muslim friend. Maybe you've wanted to, and you've just been a little bit nervous. Now the opportunity is ripe. Now being able to call, send a text, just say, how you doing? I just wanted to check in on you, and just be able, like, the door is wide open. We're now encouraged to connect with people, right? In an alternate way. And the other thing is I've seen this demonstrated in my neighborhood, is we're encouraged, at least here in Los Angeles and other parts of the country, it's starting to buckle down as well. But in California, limit your outside activity. But again, be encouraged to walk around your block. And so, if there is a Muslim in your neighborhood that you have been wanting to connect with, but haven't yet, in your neighborhood, start walking and intentionally walk that way. And we're finding more and more people are hanging out in their lawns, greeting people. In one of the neighborhoods where a couple of my church friends live, people are throwing concerts, and so all the neighbors are coming out. So now people are coming outside their door, they're hanging out in their yard. This could be a great way just to walk by and say hi. And then the third thing I thought of was, now Jamie, like, we are really restricted in our interaction. So many people are now homebound, especially those students who are now left to study. I thought, and I was encouraged by a local fella here. What he did is he just called up the mosque and said, hey, I'm a former math teacher. Is there anyone in the mosque that needs a tutor? And so I speak to even educators out there, or experts in other fields, like, reach out maybe to the Islamic Center or the mosque and say, hey, and then see if maybe you might be able to tutor folks, because everyone's needing it. Like, education in one sense is halted as they're not able to go to their campus, but the demand to learn is still pressing. And so there is that requirement. And now without that instruction, they're saying many students are really being hindered by that. So I thought right? Those are the three things I thought that's what we can be doing now in the midst of what kind of our current climate is.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great. Those are great suggestions. Thank you for that. I want to close this portion just with Jennifer. You had provided with me earlier a quote that I just really loved by Henry Nouwen. When honored and exercised as a divine imperative, it's about knowing that reaching out to others is an act of worship, thus challenging, humbling, and spiritually transformative. Hospitality is an act of worship. It's a beautiful way to introduce people to the love of Christ, and so that's kind of what we're encouraging everyone to do. And we're going to get through COVID-19. We're going to come to the other side, and when we do, we want you to know that the Truth Collective is available to help make those initial engagements. We have tea boxes that we can send to you that can be helpful in opening your doors to your Muslim friends. But in the meantime, do take that good advice and just use digital and technology, not only to your neighbors, but also to people around the world. You can reach them through social media and things of that nature. If you need help getting connected to people digitally, we can absolutely do that. Please email info@thetruthcollective.org and we'll help get you connected to someone around the world. So Jennifer, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.